Hello there. Welcome back to the City Till We Die podcast, episode number 8. And the trend is Norwich City are not very good. So, what we're going to be talking about today is the fact that Norwich City aren't very good. Adam, we haven't done one of these for what feels like a little while. I think the general consensus amongst us was we're probably going to talk and sort of cover very similar subjects to what we've done before. But the only thing that's really changed is that Norwich City are progressively getting worse, and the situation is getting uglier, and our feelings are becoming more and more just depressed. I really I struggle to put into words how we're going to tackle this, but we'll give it a go. I think both of our emotions are perhaps slightly more under control. I'm not going to say different because they're definitely not different, but they're slightly more under control than perhaps they were on Saturday at 2 o'clock, because heads are on Mars, and I just don't see how they're going to come back down. So first and foremost, we'll separate football from real life. Adam, how you doing? Beyond the football, how's life? Good?
Yeah, it's been good. Yeah, I've had a week off work. I had a little trip to Dublin for a few days, which was nice to kind of take the thoughts away from the football. So I wasn't at Carrow Road on Saturday, albeit I did decide to put myself through the torture of watching the game in a bar, where most people weren't remotely interested in the Norwich game, to the point that they kind of went off and played pool or whatever darts in this particular establishment. And to be honest, I don't blame them. I wish I'd have joined them rather than sat there and endured 90 minutes of a Shane Duffy masterclass, and nothing's changing ever since, which I think I tweeted slightly angrily after the game, and kind of expected it to be the case. And it remains the case that everybody in the certain positions in the football club that people want change will still remain in place heading into Wednesday night.
It's mental, isn't it, that you were on holiday and you made it, I think it really sums up like Norwich City fans. Just that loyalty and that habit of watching them no matter how bad they are. And this is the worst Norwich City have been for such a long time. And I think I mentioned it in the last video I did. And me and Adam are of a similar age, for those that don't know. So the last time Norwich City were this bad would have been the season that they went down to League One, and we were 7, 8, maybe 9, which, I mean, it is almost feels like a lifetime ago. And it's almost full circle to a degree. And as a 7-year-old watching Norwich City, you're not quite cognizant to what's going on. You're not quite aware of things. Whereas sitting here now as a 25-year-old man that's been going since the age of 5, you feel like you've seen it all. And then you watch this Norwich City team put on the displays that they have, and go about their business and in the style that they have, and you just think, okay, no, I haven't quite seen it all. So I mean, we'll see what continues to unfold. Adam, I want to start with Hull, because I really don't feel like we'll talk too much about Hull before we get onto the bigger picture of what the hell is going on. But in terms of that game, let us try to look at it from just a footballing point of view. Again, for Norwich City, a game of two halves, another one where we come in at half time, and we feel like we can kick on and that the chances have been there. Obviously, there was the sort of the routine capitulation of Norwich City in the second half in the Championship this season. But that first half, is it enough for you to look at a team and almost diagnose that issue of just needing to take chances? How do you reflect on it?
Yeah, the lack of clinical edge has clearly become a problem, and a major problem over the course of sort of the last, 8, 9 games. And Norwich aren't really scoring goals at all. If they are, it's tending to come from, a piece of individual brilliance rather than, a sort of goal that's well crafted and built from the back moving forwards. Sargent remains as isolated as he looks in every single game so far, really, ever since that sort of burst at the start of the season. Some of those attacking creative players, again, sort of lacking most of Norwich's sort of, I suppose, attacking output came from set pieces, those couple of sort of headers from corners, and you sort of sat there thinking to yourself, this is going to be another one of those days it gets to half time. And as much as you can try and take the positives, there is that sort of gut feeling of, here we go, deja vu's about to hit, and Norwich will concede an early goal, and there it was. And from that moment on, they just looked like a team lacking confidence, as they do at the moment, a team that doesn't really have that fighting hunger to sort of come back in games. And find a way to get results. I think a lot of people have said it. Even teams where maybe they're poor and struggling, they always manage to find a way to get some sort of point at home or a win somewhere. Norwich just don't look like doing that at the moment against whoever it is, whether it's somebody struggling at the bottom or someone high flying at the top. And yeah, my concerns of where this is going is to then see no real change in that period. I just don't understand really how we're what now 13 games in and nothing materially on the pitch is changing, and we just seem to be going game to game. And my concern is that we get further down the track and all these kind of games that we're losing at the moment, we're going to come back to bite Norwich further on and towards the end of the season when points really matter. And these games around any period, September, October, they all sort of come back to either bite you in the arse or sort of find a way of helping you sort of move up the table. So yeah, it's a pretty dire situation at the moment. And I was quite glad, to be honest, that my vision of Saturday's game was slightly muddied by substances that people, I don't recommend people take in terms of drink in a pub. So nothing else.
Really glad that you said drink at the end there.
Yeah,
I
I was
thought,
gonna
oh
say,
my
I then
god,
thought to myself, I need to probably establish what I meant there. Yeah,
thank
it's
you,
that's
thank
what
you.
Norwich City have driven me to now. That's what Norwich City have driven me to.
If there are any children listening, go to bed. So I want to put a pin in sort of the lineup because it's a big talking point from the game, isn't it? And I completely agree with everything you've said. But I want to put a pin in the lineup because there is a larger point to be made about a certain individual and what they represent, because we have to talk about it, and we're not going to treat it as if it's a massive deal, because it's not. But it's a Norwich City podcast, and we're going to talk about it. Do you think that when Liam Manning says, right, and we're, we're already sort of moving on from looking at the game specifically and onto sort of the wider point, when Liam Manning lines up for that interview where he's already gone down the tunnel and not acknowledged the fans, and it's 50-50 in my mind of it's fair enough because as a human I wouldn't want to face it, but also at a time when you need leaders, the head coach is a head coach. They are supposed to lead the team. And after the game, when his players need him the most, he's nowhere to be seen, and he can apologise, whatever. Textbook play. Textbook play. Do you think when Liam Manning talks to Chris Gorham or Connor or whoever he speaks to after the game, and he speaks of schoolboy errors and not being clinical, is it a case of, and it feels naive and almost borderline sociopathic to say it, but do you think it's a case of treading along that line of insanity of just plodding on and almost just waiting until those chances are taken, or is it really just done and dusted? I feel like I know the answer, but I just want to ask the question to almost see where your head's at.
Yeah, I think it's done and dusted. I'm kind of with the majority. I think at the moment, say I wasn't at the game, but I've seen the subsequent footage and sort of ugly scenes behind the stadium, in front of the stadium after the game, and it's just not healthy really for anybody. I think it's, as you said, on a human level for Liam Manning having to endure the criticism and the stick and the anger and frustration of the fan base, which is totally fair. Is that a fan base that was sold a top six push this season and almost raised expectations to then find themselves 23rd in the division, only sort of propped up by a team that's in administration and really struggling for a number of years, is a pretty dire position to be in. And when you've kind of got somebody above you in Ben Napper, who's nowhere to be seen at the moment, not really putting himself in the public eye and sort of trying to take a little bit of that sort of stick and criticism away from Liam Manning, if that's what he feels he needs to do. And he's the man that, Norwich City want to lead this moving forwards, which clearly under, Mark Atanasio's most recent sort of media round, he sort of mentioned how, they see Liam Manning as the man to take it forward still. And yeah, it just feels a little bit untenable at the moment. The fan base is angry. And it's just, yeah, I don't think it's healthy for anyone. The fans, Liam Manning, anybody involved with that football club, to let this just continue to peter on, because clearly there's no, change on the pitch. The results aren't going Norwich City's way. Clinically, as you say, they're not taking the chances in the first half, and then second half they just look completely hopeless in every single game. So the trends are there for me, and the trends aren't changing. There's nothing there that I can look at and cling on to and think, yeah, this is gonna turn for the good. And Liam Manning's going to get this team motivated and winning games anytime soon. And that's a pretty concerning position to be in, I think, particularly when you look at the league table and that gap to safety at the moment just seems to keep growing. And we know what the championship's like, how relentless it is. The further you get cut adrift, the more difficult it's going to be for Norwich City to find themselves to be in a position to try and climb out of this mess that they're currently in.
Yeah, from the outside looking in, it almost sort of feels like Norwich City are just drifting away. Like there is no fight being put up. There is no resistance to I mean whatever is going on, and Norwich City fans clearly have a powerful voice. We've seen that recently, and we'll get on to perhaps reflecting on that Mark Atanasio interview on Radio Norfolk and the actions of the stadium development, and clearly the fans will listen to. And it went that step further, didn't it? On Saturday, both before, during, after the game, and before and after is very much sort of how can we have those uncomfortable. I want to say conversations. They weren't conversations. How can we make the board and whoever feel the pressure, and that pressure was applied in the way that you would expect to be done by football fans. And I wasn't there myself, didn't see it myself. I've seen videos, I've read sort of eyewitness accounts of stuff, and people are well within their rights to do it. And it's almost a delicate thing to have to say to people that will sit and listen to this, and we don't want to almost incriminate ourselves, but people are well within their rights to do it. Everyone sort of knows what that line of right and wrong is, and Norwich City fans, providing they stay the correct side of that line, I just really hope they're listened to, because man, it is unfolding just so, in such a hideous manner, and it's so painful, it's so expensive, and it's just so miserable. So the first point I want to make is, and it kind of almost helps us transition from the game into the wider picture, is Shane Duffy. Oh, say his name 3 times and it'll appear. So Shane Duffy starting. If you look at the character, you look at what's gone on with him, it's all stuff we don't really want to talk about. It's stuff that has a legitimate sort of reason for him to not be here, but he is. Ignoring that stuff and putting sort of, I don't know how old he is, 34, 35-year-old Shane Duffy into that lineup where you've signed, I think Ben Napper has signed, what, 3 or 4 centre-backs? The fact that he is almost being called upon as, and let's not be hyperbolic here and say that he's clearly been perceived as the second coming of Gary Doherty, but he clearly has been called upon because the current crop isn't good enough, and Norwich City are in the trenches and they need someone to dig them out and to drag them through the mud. What do you make of almost the message that sends from Liam Manning to us, but also to his superior and Ben Napper? To me, and correct me if I'm wrong, it feels like he's saying, what you've given me is not good enough. And there is almost that easy answer of, well, Cordoba's injured, but we know how pony he is, so you're not putting the wool over anyone's eyes with that. Well, what do you make of Liam Manning's sort of almost tactical approach, and how he's using this arsenal of players, whether you think they're good or bad? What do you think the message is from Manning to Napper, and how do you perceive that? Because it doesn't look good at all, does it?
No, I think on top of that, even visually, the second half substitution of Eurosec remaining on the bench and young Mundell Smith, who, don't get me wrong, is a talented young player and hopefully comes good for Norwich in the future. The fact you've got a £6-7 million player there that you've outlaid big money on, and said he's going to be sort of a real talent for this group of individuals, and trying to help Norwich move forwards to try and push towards the goal of reaching the Premier League, which feels a million miles away at the moment. Yeah, that's just further for me where Liam Manning's head at in terms of where this squad's at, and Shane Duffy, for everything that he's done wrong, and you can question his football ability on the pitch, but I don't see how you can view him as a leader after some of the things that he's done for them. Some of this young crop of players, particularly someone like McConville who's alongside him. Yes, he's had some good moments in his career, but some of the sort of recent off the field antics, it's just not great in terms of someone to look up to, and someone to almost model the sort of role professional on. Yeah, I think that's the sad indictment of where Norwich City are at, and that is why I felt in the summer they didn't really sign enough championship seasoned, experienced players, and that's why they're having to turn to someone like Shane Duffy, who wasn't wanted and wasn't seen as part of the plans 2-3 months into this sort of project. And you've got someone like Jakov Medic, who, again, completely the wrong player for this squad and the way Liam Manning wants to play. And that's why this whole transfer window was completely muddled. The players they brought in were a mishmash of different players that probably were more suited towards previous management rather than Liam Manning, and that's why I think Norwich find themselves in this mess. And I just don't think they've got enough time to try and get this group of players almost playing the system that Liam Manning wants them to play in, and sort of, I guess, understand the roles that he wants them to sort of sort of stylistically play in a match. So Yeah, it's a complete and utter shambles, to be honest, that someone like that is still being relied upon in the starting 11. You know, if it had been on the bench because Norwich were short in numbers due to injuries, then I can kind of slightly accept it if he's just going to sit there and do a job on the bench. But to be starting in a game when you've signed, yeah, 3, 4 senior pro centre backs, yeah, it is kind of the sad position I think that Norwich City find themselves in at the moment. And everything that you said there, I totally agree with.
There's been a lot of articles sort of during the summer really about how Norwich City were trying to offload Shane Duffy and sort of Ben Slimani was the other character. And to be here now where, and again, that corner and his header, you're just like, it's almost written in the stars, but actually it's not because the header was saved. And then we're all looking at another mention, another part of the game that is just constantly being mentioned. And I mean, when you're looking for leaders, you need to look basically anywhere but there. And I just, it's an element of, I think you are allowed to almost feel sorry for Liam Manning, whilst knowing and acknowledging and understanding that he isn't the right man for the job, and he's doing well below, well, not below par, just terribly. Like he's doing terribly. You can feel that level of sympathy, but also acknowledge that he's doing such a poor job. I'm gonna sort of put it to you, Adam. Where do you want to start with the Mark Atanasio stuff and the ownership, and because there's so many layers to almost what needs to be addressed with Norwich City. Do you want to start with management in terms of manning and personnel, or do you want to start right from the top and work your way down? What's preferable for you? Because I don't know.
Yeah, I don't even know where to start with it. Yeah, it was an interesting hour or so. Clearly got a lot more out of it in terms of baseball rather than football, which was quite alarming. I think you kind of look at sort of some of the messaging and some of the trust that's being placed within certain individuals in this football club at the moment. Far too much trust, not enough scrutiny or enough questioning of those people within those sort of executive positions in this football club who obviously run the day to day business, both on and off the field. You can fully back Liam Manning, but for me, you kind of need some evidence to back it up. This sort of line of, oh, he's an experienced English coach. Well, Neil Warnock's an experienced English coach. That's just a complete nonsense. If you've got a group of players that aren't signed to play a certain way, or you've not got a coach there that can motivate a group of individuals to achieve what you want to achieve, then that's just pie in the sky. Because Daniel Farker wasn't an English experienced coach, but ultimately he had a team behind him in higher positions that recruited for him and what he wanted, and he managed to motivate a group of individuals and stylishly set them up to get results in the Championship and push them towards the Premier League. And you can question the Premier League element. The first season for me was a write-off, but the second one maybe a little bit more so. But yeah, I just can't really quite understand how, yeah, we're at this point where he's had 13 games now, and you still believe on the evidence that we've seen on the pitch and the emotions of the fans, everything that's going on online, which we've spoke before about social media and maybe not trying to read too much into it. But for me now, what we're seeing on social media is a completely fair representation of what we're seeing off the field, because that was pretty visually on show on Saturday afternoon with all the videos we've seen subsequently of the fans' anger and frustration and that sort of unsettled feeling at the moment around Carrow Road. And that's only going to get worse if we're in a position where he's backed on another couple more games. We get to Saturday and he's still in charge and nothing has materially changed, and Norwich haven't got some form of result. And I think even if they have got some form of result on Wednesday night against Sheffield Wednesday, if they go and lose again on Saturday at Carrow Road, that place is going to be so toxic. It's almost not fair on a human level for anybody involved to be part of that. But that is going to be the case, because ultimately when you're backing someone and you're not giving the fans any sort of reasoning to why you're backing him, or kind of any messaging, I guess, for them to get on board with, then they've got no reason not to show that anger and frustration, which it is my fear that Saturday is going to get pretty ugly.
It's such a rare thing, isn't it, that a manager these days will do the honourable thing and walk away. We're well beyond that point where I truly think Liam Manning needs to resign. I don't expect him to. I don't blame him for not resigning, because the payout that lies ahead, whether he gets the full 4 years, or something in my gut tells me that maybe there's something in there about almost like a trigger, if he's dismissed within a certain period of time, based off nothing. It's just understanding modern football contracts and the loopholes that are always present within them. And it's just such a, an unheard of thing really now that a manager will just actually be like, yeah, do you know what? I can't do this because it will just tarnish further jobs. And it's a crying shame. And, all the points you make in there, Adam, are absolutely bang on. And Mark Atanasio has essentially almost put out the blueprint for us to see. Sort of what and maybe not when, but how decisions will be made. So Liam Manning and this record you mentioned is almost why he's in post, and Ben Napper is in post because you almost need to back the two as a pair. So if you back one, you have to back the other, and that's a corner that Mark Atanasio has really sort of backed himself into. And he said himself, didn't he? He said Liam needs Ben and Ben needs Liam. And I'm kind of glad that that is almost a recognition of if one goes, the other has to follow suit. But at the same time, the further I don't want to say it feels like he's admitting something. It more felt like a passing comment that his Norwich City and general football knowledge all is within the club, and almost Ben Napper is, I mean, I can't think of almost a softer synonym for gaslighting, but he is almost protecting his job by taking advantage of Mark Atanasio's lack of football knowledge. And again, you go further up the chain and you look at the mediocrity that's been overseen by this board at the moment, and they're very much going to support Ben Napper in what they do. They're not going to be going, well, Mark, actually, he should be doing this, this, and this, because they all know that they're culpable for what has been, or since Daniel Farker left, and that's more of a trigger point than it's all because of Daniel Farker. But they're all in this together. They've all caused this in their own different ways. And I'm not saying Ben Napper is directly responsible for what Stuart Webber did after Daniel Farker, but sadly he's got to take the front of the anger because he's in the role. He could have been here for 6 months and he'd still have to take the front of the anger because he's the person who is directing sport at Norwich City. It's no mean feat. And I don't know. It's really worrying. That I think that's the main thing, and we have to acknowledge a tweet we saw from Chris Reeve, an exclusive that he broke regarding Ben Kensel, formerly employed by the club, and this mention of Kieran Scott, again formerly employed by the club, who perhaps have a dream to come in and fix Norwich City. And I don't really want to talk about Ben Kensel as an individual. I don't really want to talk about Kieran Scott as an individual because where I sit, I just can't see Kieran Scott happening at all. Ben Kensel, maybe, but it almost feels irrelevant. And the more relevant part it is the role and the fact that someone needs to be there who is on Mark Atanasio's side to essentially point out who's doing what wrong. Because if a fresh face comes in, whether it's Ben Kensel or not, for as much as we might want to throw some constructive criticism their way, they are new and they will have that objective point of view to almost drip feed the information to Mark Atanasio. And he clearly is a very clever individual. He clearly is a very personal individual. There's a reason that Delia Smith and Michael Wynne-Jones sold up to him and his group, which is almost, it's a silver lining. But again, it's a very dim light at the end of the tunnel. And that role, Adam, how do you, for example, say, Mark Atanasio picks up the phone to you and says, look, Adam, I need someone who knows football, but can be non-biased and can help me get this asset that I've bought back on track. How do you approach that? Right. And, I implore you to be a bit more specific than not. I just sat Liam Manning. Like, what's the approach you take? And in that, tell me a little bit about how you communicate with fans and, I don't know, maybe the backlash you'd expect. Like, treat it like a simulation almost. Sort of, how would you go about it?
Yeah, I think it's a difficult sort of act to balance, I guess, because you almost saying to someone, if it is Ben Kensel, come in and, join this football club, and you've almost got to go in and sort of assess and scrutinize everybody within that football club who, that sort of alienation, I guess, where they've had almost control of it and they've been in control of their own destiny for, 2 years now in Ben Napper's case. And he spent a lot of money in that period of time, £55 million on players, and we're in the position we're in. Does he then sort of feel, I don't know, not sort of, yeah, maybe that sort of lack of trust that he has with Mark Attanasio will be broken, and maybe fans might feel that that's for the good, and kind of, I guess that level of kind of somebody overseeing it and being there to kind of relay it is, yeah, probably a good thing. But then you again are sort of yeah, putting a lot of trust, I guess, within whoever that individual is you're bringing in to oversee things to then again make the right decisions because you're not there on the ground to sort of see it unfolding and maybe kind of see that day-to-day business and what it looks like inside the walls of Carrow Road and Colney, and the sort of work that's being done on and off the field. Yeah, I just think it's a difficult position that they've sort of put themselves into. You know, you kind of see some other owners that stay distant and maybe don't kind of involve themselves on a match day or sort of around the football club. And I know Mark sort of dipped in and out at different points, but clearly when you've got other businesses and sort of sports businesses that you're trying to oversee at the same time, it's difficult to kind of, as much as I know, you know, the club will push the message of he's, you know, fully involved and he speaks to Ben all the time. You know, one chat a day or a few chats a day isn't kind of a full picture of what's going on, you know, every single minute of the day, in those walls. So I do think it's a good thing if you have somebody there, but then again, you need to find the right person who you can fully trust to make the correct judgments to almost sort of push that information back to you, because we saw it a little bit with, you know, Ben's decision to depart of Johannes, and I know Mark said at the time he was really surprised that was call was made, and you know, probably one that he maybe wouldn't have made himself. So I think that's where you kind of, this sort of role, I guess, has to come into its own, where you almost need somebody there to kind of, I suppose, help almost be a little bit more impartial and kind of give that other side of the picture away from just purely Ben Napper. Because at the moment, it feels like, you know, Mark is putting way too much trust within certain executives who are clearly going to push their own narratives to keep their own jobs, because why would you do anything else?
It, if I was Ben Napper, I would be. Maybe he is on edge. Maybe he's watching all of our podcasts, thinking, "Oh God, how do I fix this?" But I really would be quite nervous about my job because some of the comments Mark Atanasio made have been fairly blasé. So you mentioned the ones there about Thorpe a few months ago, and you look at, it was last week, wasn't it? You look at last week and the comments about Nunes and almost the element of surprise. And with Nunes specifically, Atanasio basically said I'd have vetoed it if I'd been in power longer. I d Something's not quite adding up here because they're very blasé comments from a very wealthy owner who is, it's not like sort of Dealer and Michael where it almost feels like they're one of your mates. This is meant to be a ruthless businessman who's just bought your club to propel it into the future in a very bright fashion. And to make those comments sort of really offhandedly, I just, I don't know, something's not quite adding up. Maybe he's almost trying to soften the blow and for them and to make them feel like they're not just going to get chopped immediately. I really don't know. I don't know the psychology behind it, but it does feel like something will have to give at some point. And I just, it's so tricky because, as you say, you can get a CEO in or whatever, and that person might not be the right person, but it's a process. And the way Norwich City's processes lie at the moment are just, everything is so unclear and almost directionless. And we as supporters, who the whole thing is about us. The whole thing is about us going, watching, supporting, and enjoying ourselves. That is what football is about. And that is completely lost at the moment, which is a damn shame. And I mean, it's a disgrace as well that it feels like, and you know, it was almost, well, it was addressed, wasn't it, in terms of the stadium development plans and Mark Atanasio stepping in and clearly overruling the board who spent multiple years on 5 different plans to pick out this one that everyone was just like, what the hell at immediately. Again, sort of almost just encapsulating the incompetency that sort of sits above us and, you know, just below Mark Atanasio. And you know, that almost feels quite nice that he stepped in and he did what he felt was right, and actually something that wasn't really a footballing decision he clearly got right, and showed that, look, we're going to try and retain that community sense, we can try and retain that fan relationship, but it's so fractured, it's so fragile at the moment, and it really feels like it's just going to completely implode. And for example, with the 5 tennis balls, we can laugh at it all we want because it felt a little bit pathetic, but the fact that one person feels it necessary to throw a tennis ball onto the pitch, and throwing a tennis ball onto the pitch is a symbol, right? We all know what it means and we all know why people do it. The fact one person genuinely felt the need to do it, it's just, it's insane. And do you know what? We're focusing on the volume and the fact that it was just a couple of people rather than what they're doing it for. Like, that's the bit we're looking at. No one's going, oh yeah, but they shouldn't. Everyone is like, oh yeah, do you know what? It's fair enough. It's just, haha, it was 5 tennis balls. Like, that is where we are. Everything about Norwich City is just, I mean, it's rotting. It's rotting to its core, and I don't know. It really, it's hard to not wind yourself up. And in terms of that pathway to getting ourselves out of here, you as a supporter, Adam, again, it's almost asking the same question. But what do you want to hear? Because there needs to be that transparency. But we know and we understand and we appreciate that we aren't going to sit and every single conversation at Carrow Road and at Colney is not going to be minuted, and we're not going to read it all, but we need to be involved. We don't want to be involved in the sense of we have to band together and get a decision overturned. We want to feel like we're listened to, and hopefully this new stadium development plan, whatever it may be, is a reflection on what, and you're never going to please everyone, and boy do we know that here in Norfolk, but it needs to be a reflection of a joint effort between football club listening to consumer, because that's what we are to them. We're consumers. Um, Hopefully, we're a little bit more than that, but at the end of the day, it is what we are. We're almost a client, and they've got to keep us happy. But I just, I don't know. I don't know how do you fix it? Like, do you think that Ben Napper coming out and sitting down on, and I'll say on the radio, or face to face with the Pink, and not an in-house club interview, because that will only stoke the fire. Do you feel like at this point an interview could do some good, or are we too far gone?
Yeah, it's difficult. I guess it's
Both.
up. Yeah, I guess it's up to the fans and maybe where individuals feel it's at. I think a lot of people would probably side, but they don't really want to hear from Ben Napper. They just want him gone. And you said there about, Atanasio and clearly those within sort of senior positions there looking at it and being like, okay, the fan backlash on the development has been listened to, but then they're not listening to kind of that fan frustration around Ben Napper, Liam Manning, and maybe changing the direction from a footballing sense on the field, because nothing's materially changed now in the last month or so, really. I think they had the opportunity maybe after the Ipswich game and the international break to sort of show that symbol of change and maybe a little bit more of a pivot in a different direction to try and maybe make this season turn out for the best. They've sort of afforded another 5 games down the track of 5 more defeats or whatever since it's been, and the mess just looks even more dangerous in terms of where Norwich are heading, and that looks downwards rather than upwards at the moment. And yeah, for that reason, I think as much as Ben Napper coming out would maybe take a little bit of heat off Liam Manning, who I feel a little bit sorry for at this point. He feels a little bit like a lamb to slaughter, having to go out to the media 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 times a week to almost say the same things, because nothing's materially changing on the field. Clearly, nothing's materially changing off the field, and he feels like a bit of a broken man. Almost that kind of cycle where we've seen it with other managers, Dean Smith, David Wagner, where they just look beaten down and kind of it's pretty clear that the sort of end is in sight. But it's almost like that delaying of just when's it going to happen, and the fact no one's making that decision, and Ben Napper's not going to make that decision because he will know, as you said, Mark Attanasio kind of labelled the two together, that his job is probably going to be severely under threat, if not completely over, if that decision gets made, and therefore he's not kind of in a position where at the moment he's going to get rid of Liam Manning for all of those reasons, and it's going to be another costly mistake for Norwich, giving him a deal as much as they might be able to. As you said, there might be some sort of clause within it. It's still going to cost them significant money to remove a man who they've had in post for 3 months, and after sort of a big scouting mission to appoint Torrup to then kind of abandon that and go down this direction, which again, just the lack of direction at this football club at the moment. I'm not really sure any sort of interview is going to give any more direction or any sort of positive outcome that fans are going to cling on to and think, yep, this club is going to move in the right direction anytime soon.
So, Adam, we sort of discussed the rest of, I mean, I don't know what you want to call it, the leadership team, the execs and personnel names like Zoe Webber, Neil Adams. We've gone very heavy on Ben Napper and Liam Manning and Mark Atanasio, and they're the main three, really, aren't they? They're the main three characters of this horrible, horrible film we're watching. Um, wha- it is almost like a copy and paste point in terms of that leadership team, that senior authority at Norwich City, where, and I appreciate that you see all sorts of names on Twitter, don't you, mentioned, and they need sacking, they need sacking. It does feel as if like just a clear out across the board is needed, and I don't know, it's not really much else we can say, is there?
Not really. No, I think individually they've all been part of what collectively has become an absolute shambles over the last 4 years, really. A lot of big objectives that have not been met, a lot of money spent in that time, a lot of bad decisions, sort of decisions that have, come back to eventually haunt them, as we find at the moment, or kind of the messages of we're going to be pushing towards top six that we've had now for 4 years, and none of them have ever really materialized or anything close, apart from that David Wagner season, where it was almost siege mentality and a point to almost prove Ben Napper wrong. I feel that kind of built them the foundations to try and get there, and it was pretty obvious from that Ellen Road display how drastically vast the gap was between them and some of the other teams that were actually up there. So yeah, I think it's very easy to kind of get carried away and say we need to get rid of everybody. And I think there is mitigation and factors that both kind of swing in everybody's favor to get rid of certain individuals or maybe keep some individuals. But for the long term future, it does feel like certain people, whether that is Ben Napper, Zoe Webber, Neil Adams, whoever it might be, some of the recruitment team, analysts, whatever it might be, probably do need to move on, and there does need to be that almost complete reset, which it feels like we've sort of tried to have now for quite a number of years. We've seen different managers come and go. We've obviously had the change of sporting director, but there are certain people that have been in certain positions for a long time now that have sort of been part of the good times, but also, as we've sort of seen this massive dramatic downfall of Norwich City, that we're currently enduring at the moment, and they are accountable for a lot of that, and that lack of accountability from certain individuals, it just hasn't really been there. And for that reason, for me, the scrutiny is only going to get louder, and the fans' frustrations are only going to get bigger. So something's got to change, whoever that might be. I think we need to see something within the fairly short term just to signal there's going to be some sort of change moving forward. Because I think if we don't, then yeah, I just don't think getting rid of Manning and trying to appoint another manager is going to be enough now to make fans feel satisfied or happy with their football club.
When you're a senior figure, I say that as if I'm speaking as one. When you're a senior figure of whatever department of a football club, so Liam Manning as head coach and the players, or Ben Napper, the sporting director, you need to put your stamp on things. And the stamp that the current crop below in their time, Mark Atanasio, have made is just, it's just not it. And Mark Atanasio and his ownership group need to start putting their stamp on the football club. And I really hope that the stadium development plans isn't a sign of things to come. They've been addressed. They've been the beginning of rectifying it has begun. Judgment will be preserved until we see what the plan is, and that plan, as promised by our owner, will be something built alongside fans and for the fans. So we'll preserve judgment for then. But and I appreciate and understand that it's not just an overnight change of making that stamp. So employing your own staff and giving your club the direction you want it to take. We need to see something. And as fans, I don't think we really know what that is. Beyond the football, I mean, I don't think we have to know, but I feel like we deserve to see some kind of action. Again, we're theorizing. Maybe we'll take a sort of week to think about it and come up with some ideas. But that is where Norwich City are, and something needs to change. But to make it about the football, let's talk about. We aren't going to necessarily use names, but Liam Manning and the probably soon to be vacant head coach role at Norwich City Football Club. When you think of replacing, and we're not even going to pretend, oh, it's just theorizing, because it's going to happen. He's going to get the sack at some point. What are you going to be looking for at this point? Because we might only be 12 games into the season, or 13 games, or whatever it is. But we had the same conversation, didn't we? It's only 5 games. It's only 6 games. It's only 7 games. And I feel like it could just carry on all the way to the very end. But when you look at replacing Liam Manning with the group you have there, and we've seen enough of everyone to have a decent idea of who does what and how they want to play. Obviously, we've not seen people at their best, but you can almost see the character traits and the way players want to play. Do you think, right, let's get a project manager in who we can back for 3 years? Or do you think, right, we need someone here and now to fix Norwich City, to save them almost from relegation, and not necessarily, oh yeah, we'll have them until the end of the season, then we'll get in a project manager. We don't want to almost David Wagner to Thorpe it. But is a project manager enough at this point to try and turn Norwich City around? Is it almost a blessing for them that we only played 12, 13 games? Like, what are you looking for in terms of a manager, and why?
Yeah, I think if they're going down the project manager route, you probably need more stability in those sort of higher up positions, and a sort of clear direction and a clear backing that individual's going to get a longer period of time than maybe Johannes Torup did, who was told it was a project and you're going to have a bit of time here before judgment's made. Yet 10 months in, and we all saw it on the pitch, it was regressing downwards. But, it was a young group of players. A lot of those individuals had never played English football before. There was a lot of sort of blend still of individuals that were part of that David Wagner squad, some of those sort of experienced players that clearly weren't Torapites in terms of individuals and the way he wanted to play. So if you're going to go down that route, with this current crop of players, it's difficult because will that manager want the certain individuals that Norwich have got at the moment and spent so much money on? I think that's going to be difficult. So for me, I think they're going to have to look more short term and probably find someone who can come and revitalize this group, actually get some confidence into them and almost motivate them, because at the moment they don't look remotely motivated whatsoever. And I think the situation they find themselves in, particularly if they hang on to Liam Manning for a number of games further, it's only going to get probably more dire than it does positive. And Norwich City could easily find themselves starting to get a little bit cut adrift, and they can't afford for that to happen. Certainly heading into that Christmas period where often teams' seasons and their sort of eventual position is kind of decided. And I think Norwich needs someone in charge who's going to get them results, whether that is playing a little bit ugly just to get a 1-0 scrappy win at home. That's what Norwich need at the moment. It's kind of how dire the position is. But then I think then if you're then looking maybe upper sort of at some of the other individuals that sit above the head coach, if you're then going to change those, maybe then is the time to be looking more for a project manager, and kind of when the club's in a position where they're fully reset and look, okay, we're now going to bring somebody on board. I kind of go back to 2017, that action of bringing in Stuart Webber when things were regressing and Norwich City were in a difficult position, but certainly not in the position they're in at the moment. And that felt fresh. It felt new. Then Webber went out there, found his man in Daniel Farker, fully backed him. That project he could have easily pulled the plug on pretty quickly, decided to stick with it. And I think as much as there was, mutterings and a few sort of fans starting to feel a little bit frustrated, particularly in that sort of start of that second season and that result with Ipswich, everybody knows how key that was for Daniel Farker keeping his job. I think if Norwich are then in a position where next summer they can almost reset and kind of get that messaging out there, and fans can actually believe that there's going to be a project for them to cling on to, because we saw the optimism last summer when they pointed Torp. It was like, okay, this is fresh, this is new, like the look of this project and this idea. 10 months in, you completely abandon it. Fans need to actually believe that something's going to be stuck to, and what they're sort of being sold is actually going to materialize. And at the moment, I think with the current sort of positions, or those in positions, in executive positions, if they came out there and said, look, this is a fresh project, back it, I don't think any fan trusts that would actually happen.
Norwich City are in a really dangerous position because when it comes to a manager, as you say, yeah, it needs to be someone to save the season. I'm not looking at it as like Russ Martin, for example. We aren't going to get into whether we want Russ Martin or not. And for the record, I personally don't, because I just don't think it's worth the vitriol that would cause. I really just don't think any of that is worth the gamble it would be. For as much as I like Russell Martin, as he's a Norwich City legend, but also admire him as a coach. I do. I'm sorry. I just don't think it's worth having that here. Maybe at the beginning of this season, maybe. But it really isn't worth it now. We need someone in who you associate with steadying the ship, like a Gary O'Neill. And literally, as of recording this, I think he's going back to Wolves. I don't know why. And Russ Martin's linked to Southampton, so I don't really know what's happening in the footballing world. Things are going a little bit doolally, but Norwich City, in terms of that sporting director role, to replace that as well, they need experience. And I don't mean you need someone who's been doing that role for 10, 15 years, because when Stuart Webber came to Norwich, it was still almost a very fresh role, a very different role for England. And I mean, we're a few years in, but clubs are still understanding it and discovering who is good at the role, who is bad at the role, as we're discovering someone who's terrible at the role. And Stuart Webber had the experience before of being a scout, of almost being directly involved in player development, and also being a sporting director or football director, whatever he was at Huddersfield. The role was almost, I mean, I think he was more powerful at Norwich, but he clearly had that experience beforehand, but also directly in the role to step into the job at Norwich. And when did he join Norwich? He was in like March or something, and he had a period to get into the role and get to know the club a little bit. We're not saying it has to be like Johannes Thorup for Norwich when he was appointed, where they get in sort of May, June time, and then almost thrown into the deep end. And all right, conjure up some signings. We want someone to get in sooner rather than later to get their feet under the carpet and understand the role and perhaps get acquainted with the resources that are laid in front of them. And yeah, it's just I don't want to see another Ben Napper of someone who was a lone manager at Arsenal for ages. And I appreciate, yeah, it must have been a tricky job, and to be at Arsenal for as long as what he was, it's an impressive thing. But it doesn't mean it's going to translate. Norwich City need experience in, and I'm not saying that the next appointment has to be, I mean, it always has to be the right appointment, but it needs to be someone that we can get behind, because even when Napper was appointed, people were like, "Oh, what the hell is this?" And Stuart Webber's approach to all of it is something that needs to be emulated in terms of the beginning and the way he acted. And he was very candid about, look, I'm a human shield. You can say what you want to me. I'm not expecting someone to come in and be like that, but you want someone who's going to be as experienced and also responsible for their actions and the direction in which they want to take Norwich City and the signings they want to make. And it's such a shame how far we've gone from that. And actually, it was such a brief period of Norwich City's history that taught us the standards to which we should hold people in certain roles. And I don't know how we get there as fans. We can talk about it until the cows come home, but we need to take some kind of action to almost begin that chain reaction, which I hope is sooner rather than later. Um, looking forward physically, not metaphorically, because Jesus. Looking forward to Wednesday. On Wednesday, what like are we just waiting for Norwich to lose? Because to be honest with you, Adam, I'm expecting it. I'm waiting for it. I'm going to sit and watch it, and there's a little bit of me that thinks that could be it for Liam Manning. Realistically, up till now, it's been, he's going to get backed. He's going to get backed, but it really feels like Wednesday could be it.
Yeah, when you look at the dire position that they find themselves in, that's a club that's completely revitalised and feeling positive. And you see the messaging from sort of the administrators there and kind of the fans buying into everything and kind of the feeling that their club is maybe starting that gradual path back to kind of a club that's competing, I guess, at the right ends of the tables and trying to sort of push towards bigger and better things, where Norwich fans and everything around that football club at the moment feels anything but that. And it almost feels like a sense of inevitability that they're going to get that win at Hillsborough and under the lights, that sort of, stadium is going to be rocking and that positive feeling that those fans and those Owls are feeling at the moment is only going to get better after Wednesday night. And that's a pretty sad position to be in, that we're going into a game against a team rooted firmly at the bottom of the division who are pretty much nailed on, if not 99% certain to be getting relegated this season. And we're actually thinking that Norwich are going to go there and just probably put in another poor performance, probably fold like a pack of cards and inevitably come out with the defeat, not scoring a goal. And that's all we can go off at the moment, because that's what the trends are suggesting. That's the way Norwich City are playing, and that's the position they find themselves in. And yeah, it just feels inevitable. And that disinterest and that frustration and that anger, I mean, if that does happen, it is, again, heading into Saturday, then if nothing materially has changed between Wednesday and Saturday, I mean, it's going to get, as I've said a few times already, I dread to think what it's going to look like. As much as some fans might decide to vote with their feet, I think some will just go there just to almost pent their frustration and try and feel that they are actually being heard, which in terms of some of those decisions, on executives at the moment within the football club or management positions, clearly aren't being heard because nothing's changing. So yeah, it feels like a really big few days. And I think even if they go and scrape a win on Wednesday night and then they go into Saturday and they lose that game at Carrow Road, that nothing. It's not going to change the sort of wider picture, and fans aren't going to look at that sort of result in isolation on Wednesday night and think that everything's fixed, which it won't be. So yeah, I think there's got to be some sort of symbol of change this week, but I'm not too confident that there's going to be.
It feels like that's the last throw of the dice, isn't it? Where fans just stop going. We're currently in that stage of people, I think, want to go, and people want to be heard, and people almost want to have that catharticism, if I can say that word, cathartic experience of just venting. For us, a good way of doing it is this. And when you get to this stage of serious apathy, that's it. And in our lifetime, we've not seen Norwich City fans really get there. The attendances are starting to drop a little bit. to the joy of those lot down the road. But you've seen with them what happened, and very quickly. And I'm not saying the situation is the same, because the ownership situation is very, very different. But the need for change, and that feeling within you that something is going to give at some point, probably is quite similar. And that feeling of just anger and raw hatred towards decisions being made, is ever present. And if you get to a point where Norwich City fans give up on you, then good luck getting them back, because Norwich City supporters are the most loyal. That they will stick with you until the end of time. And if you manage to lose that, you deserve what's coming. And I said in the last video that Norwich City at the moment are being made to pay for their decisions, and they're almost getting what they deserve. And that doesn't mean that we deserve to watch what we're watching. It doesn't mean we deserve to listen to the excuses that are constantly just, I mean, I don't know. It really isn't a symbol of that at all, but it feels like it's karma for, and the trigger point for me is sacking Thorup. And I don't mean that as a someone who wishes he was still here. I mean it as a, you had a project, you almost tried to do the things the right way, and you had that sort of comparison, didn't you, with Stuart Webber and Daniel Farker, where you started to build the squad, you trusted the manager. But whereas Stuart Webber, and I appreciate that, maybe it won't be gotten right immediately. The next time we hire a manager, like Stuart Webber got it right, you employ that trust, and you have something to, you keep building. That the plug got pulled on this 10 months in, and for reasons that we will never truly understand, and we can only sort of almost have to believe what we read. But when you pull the plug on it, and you almost, you act cowardly, and you hide from your decisions, and you wheel out your American owner who knows nothing about football to have this conversation, you get what you deserve. And it's such a horrible and tedious way to have to pay the price for awful, awful decisions. And I just, we all know where Norwich City go from here, and I don't know what more we can say or do to change that. There is that dial of pressure in terms of, I mean, I don't want to say riots, but almost the rebellion from the Norwich City fans. There is that dial, and right now we're sort of towards the left hand side of it, and slowly it's just creeping up. And I don't know what Saturday will look like, but maybe we'll talk about it. Maybe we won't at some point, but it could get ugly. It already is ugly, but it could get a lot worse, and that frightens me. God's honest truth, it frightens me as someone who not only pays a lot of money to watch this club, but loves it dearly. I love it dearly, like more than I wish I did. It affects me more than you could ever imagine. And you've got me, you've got you, you've got the 26,000 at Carrow Road, and you've got all the City fans wherever they live around the county, around the country, across the world, that feel the exact same. This is the most united that I have seen the Norwich City fan base. We all are behind the same cause and the same belief that something needs to change. And I mean, I pray that something does soon, because not to over dramatize the getting relegated to League One, but that will just be the beginning. Some serious action needs to be taken. Adam, this has been uh certainly been. I don't really know what else to say. Is there anything left on your chest, or do you feel like perhaps it's all, I don't know, it's all out there, and it's all sort of for people to just, I don't know, nod along to, disagree with, whatever?
Yeah, I think it's now down to those within certain positions to make that change and start this sort of path towards something new and fresh and different, and something that the fans feel that needs to happen. And we need that visual representation now of that kind of from those within the walls of Carrow Road, which yeah, I'm hoping we'll see shortly. Because if not, I mean, I sort of keep thinking back to that initial relegation to League One, and that was a Norwich City that was in a very different position to where they are now. That was a squad made up of short-term loan players. It was a club financially, on the floor. This was supposed to be, under Mark Atanasio, a club that was going to progress forward towards getting towards the top flight and kind of being competitive up there. And Norwich City are miles away from that at the moment.
They were meant to help us kick on, weren't they? But it turns out that the foundations were fragile and they're collapsing. They're crumbling from beneath Mark Atanasio. And when you come in as a financial powerhouse, because it's what he is by Norwich City standards, and you lay almost this big sack of cash on top of just a straw to a degree, it's going to crumble. And sadly, that's being exposed at a very dangerous level and in a really hideous manner, which is a damn shame. And hopefully, someone does something about it sooner rather than later. Adam, thanks. Appreciate it as always. I also appreciate everyone who's subscribed to the channel, liking the videos, commenting. For as depressing as it is, we enjoy reading your comments. We enjoy having the conversation because it's there to be had. And to those who perhaps are thinking of getting involved in being part of the noise and being part of that almost rebellion group, keep it savory. Don't go too far with it, but keep the pressure up. And yeah, let's pray for better times and that Norwich City can get themselves back on track sooner rather than later. But yeah, like, subscribe, all that fun stuff, and see you in the next one.